And thank you all again for coming back this morning for the half-day program, because we are planning to plan. I love it. And so next up, I'll just introduce somebody that doesn't need much of an introduction. Mr. Rob Perro is going to do the introduction of our keynote speaker. So honored and blessed to have Chris join us this morning, but we'll have Rob give a proper introduction of him.
Good morning. What's up, everybody? How was last night? Good. I was lucky enough to go over to Potawatomi and hang out with Chris James and get liquored up with a couple bottles of wine. Got to know Chris a little bit. Total honor. First time I really got to talk to him besides last year at Res, and I'm just being super candid. When I was like, hey, when are we going to have a panel about cannabis? And he's like, well, I don't really know. Like, we got a lot of sponsors, and we're really trying to figure this thing out. And we're figuring it out. So last night, we had a really good conversation about the National Center and recognizing what ICIA is doing. And we are honored to have Chris here today, obviously, to talk about this emerging industry. And he let me know last night that they really are going to rely on us to be a resource, to lead this industry moving forward. With that inclusion from our non-native partners and from our national center as well, to make sure that we're, doing our due diligence to make sure that we're approaching this industry the right way, and also being mindful of, who our partners are that are out there, making sure that, what we're saying is actually what we're doing as well. So we need that help from the National Center. We are honored to have Chris James here today. Chris is from North Carolina, eastern band of Cherokee, and just super excited to hear his words today. And as he helps push us into the future and the vision of what we want to do in creating a cannabis economy that is equitable for all.
Thank you so much, Rob. I really appreciate that warm welcome, and it's great to be here today. I'm really excited to be among so many entrepreneurs. I've heard some of the conversations this morning, and this industry is really on the ground floor, and it's great that this association has evolved. In just a few short years, Indigenous cannabis has gone from in the fringe, as Rob sort of described, to something that we thought would never be happening, which is happening now. To be a powerful symbol of economic sovereignty and self-determination, and that's what you guys have been talking a lot over the past couple of days for. I've seen the growth of the industry firsthand, as Rob described in our 2017 early days of my time at the National Center. We actually had some cannabis present and displays on the emerging market even then. So now, in just a few years, it's really become a steady growth, and it's no longer on the fringes. So happy to be here. It's a mainstream talking point for our tribal communities, and that really makes sense in that economic development strategy. I'm excited that the Indigenous Cannabis Industry Association President Mary Jane Oatman will join us at Res, and I'm looking forward to hearing from other experts at the session that I think Rob is also going to be part of. Mary Jane's also featured in our upcoming magazine, NC Magazine. I don't know, well, she doesn't even know this, but we have, the National Center has a magazine that will be released at Res, and I'm understanding that you have an article, but I now need to fact check that. Since, anyway, we look forward to an ongoing partnership. And one side note, Mary Jane and I share the same birthday, February 25th. So happy birthday to us. February 25th, really, Rob? Wow, that's a lot of Pisces. So just really having great to see what's possible about the industry and learning more. I'm on the journey with some of you, and really look to ICIA to being the lead of that. But I'm not here to cross-promote my event or gathering with this event, but since I have said it, please visit www.ncaid.org res.org to register for res today. In all seriousness, it's important that everyone sees cannabis as an economic development tool in Indian country. As the largest business gathering of Native entrepreneurs, res is a great way to show the world that you mean business. The Indigenous Cannabis is here to stay. And I look forward to continuing the conversation in Las Vegas and beyond. In many ways, you can draw parallels between indigenous cannabis and tribal gaming. And we were just having the conversation earlier. Both started in the fringe, operating in murky legal waters and trying to do something unprecedented. The early adapters in both industries recognized that tribal sovereignty could be a distinct advantage in a new market with few incumbent players, providing incredible benefits to tribal members and tribal communities. In the 1980s, did anyone imagine that by 2022, Indian gaming would become a $39 billion annual industry? I couldn't imagine it. Where will indigenous cannabis be in 2052? An industry on par with gaming or a field where non-native operators dominate. Indigenous cannabis operators are off to a great start, and perhaps most important, they aren't pigeonholing themselves into any part of the industry. Some of the operators do retail shops. Some are growing their crops on their own tribal land. Some are producing finished products on reservations. Others are getting into testing and quality assurance. A few are fully vertically integrated, from seed to sale, selling a variety of products. The most important takeaway, there is room for you to do what you want in cannabis, whether it's one small part of the supply chain or the whole operation. Is there greater expression of sovereignty than to exercise that? Despite early successes, the current moment is critical for your industry. What do you do now will define the future. You have the opportunity to empower generations, establishing and growing an industry that will provide for your tribe and community for a foreseeable future. There's no question you, as entrepreneurs in the indigenous cannabis space, have unique challenges in which few other industries can relate. Access to traditional banking and services is extremely limited and risky, as you all know. Not everyone within a given tribal community is on board with cannabis, and that's okay. That's what sovereignty is all about. Tribes are free to make their own business decisions and decide which opportunities to pursue. We at the National Center back those decisions and are here to support. In other ways, what you're doing, starting and growing a business, is similar to what all business owners go through. And in some respect, you are better prepared to enter and thrive into a market than your potential competitors are. For example, tribes and tribal enterprises are no stranger to the challenges of access to capital and the restrictions of traditional banking and lending. You know how to thrive in difficult markets and find success where others have failed or have never even bothered to try. My message to you isn't that different from what I share to other audience regarding businesses. How can you set yourself up for success both now and in the future? What pitfalls stand in your way? Where do you have a market advantage, and what areas do you have a disadvantage? Are you getting good advice from trusted independent sources, or do your advisors have their own self-serving agenda? The first and arguably most important piece of advice I have for you is this: do your homework. You are operating in an industry in infancy, subject to complicated legal frameworks, and can change based on who's in charge in any given state or in Washington, D.C. And while tribal sovereignty offers certain advantages, it's no silver bullet. Changes in tribal leadership could mean a change in how the tribe views cannabis. As we've seen in recent years, The current Supreme Court is more than willing to chip away at tribal sovereignty, including tribal economic sovereignty. I'm not an expert in cannabis. Nearly everyone in this room knows more about the industry than I do. And you have to be an expert in this industry, not just on your products and market, but in politics, on the laws, on health and safety, on public opinion, specifically within your own community. Since you have to be the expert on so many things, you almost certainly need partners. Doing your homework means learning everything you can about your partners and those working with this endeavor. It's your job to be a healthy skeptic. Don't take everything you're sold or pitched for granted. Do your research and really understand the folks you're associating yourself with. Unfortunately, there are always bad actors looking to take advantage of Indian country, even more so when tribes get into a new field, and especially a highly regulated one. There's nothing wrong with wanting to make a healthy profit, but it has to be the tribe or the tribal entity that stands to earn the greatest benefit from putting their reputation and economic future on the line. Ask the right questions. Develop trust, check out your business partners, track record and references, and make sure you have a good attorney. And I'm looking at Samantha because, literally she just said that to me right before I started speaking. Trust in business is incredibly important regardless of your industry, and trust also extends beyond your immediate business partners. You also shouldn't be afraid to seek help or advice from others, including others in this room. No successful business or entrepreneur achieves success entirely on their own. Somewhere along the way, they asked for help, whether it was in form of a scholarship or a mentor or even help from an organization like the National Center. They didn't figure everything out on their own. Any successful entrepreneur has asked someone for advice or guidance to navigate a tricky situation or complicated business deal. One of the most rewarding aspects of working in Indian country is the willingness for tribes and Native entrepreneurs to help each other. Sure, oftentimes we're all competitors, sometimes even going after the same market or customers. But it's rare I hear of an instance where one tribe refuses to help another, or a Native business leader turns a cold shoulder to one trying to make his or her way in business. The spirit of collaboration is present at RES and every business gathering I've attended. Use that to your advantage. Take advantage of the gathering here. It's cliche but true, a rising tide lifts all boats. That's certainly the case with cannabis. You can achieve much more by working together and helping each other than establishing an adversarial relationship, by forming a robust association that allows you to pool your resources and expertise. I've talked a lot about your relationships with others, business partners, tribe, competitor, mentors, fellow entrepreneurs, but there's one other relationship that's essential to your success. It's your relationship with yourself. You must hold yourself accountable and set achievable goals for yourself and your business. This is a message I've shared at RES a lot. And the most common pitfall for business is spending so much time looking outward that you don't take time to look inward. Are you doing everything you can to move your business forward? Do you have a clear goal in mind or a plan in reaching that goal? Are you burned out to the point that you're not going to be effective? You can't allow yourself to get so caught up in your business that you forget to ask these questions, that you start down a slippery slope, beginning to steady decline that can be hard to break. Always take time for self-reflection and necessarily make a course correction. As you perform those self-assessments, you must think about what are you doing to ensure your business, your industry in general, is around to thrive for the next 30 years? What are you doing to empower for generations? Because this isn't just about you. It's not just about your business. It's about creating something lasting and sustainable that can benefit your families or your community for a long time. We may not be talking about 7 generations, but we should be at least talking about the next generation. You have to make sure that you aren't starting some fly-by-night operation. What you're doing needs to be built to last. And finally, if there's one takeaway from my remarks, remember that everyone in this room has a voice. You have the power to be the change. You can use your voice collectively to change any rule you want, whether it's here in Wisconsin or in Washington, D.C. See something you don't like, some regulation that you don't think is fair, a policy that infringes on tribal sovereignty? Do something about it. Join together and advocate for change. Use the wisdom of your elders who have fought for our rights over the past century to win battles today. You all are on the ground floor of something big, nearly unlimited potential. I look forward to following the development and the growth. Thank you so much.
Another round of applause for Mr. Chris James. Thank you again so much, Chris. Very, very much appreciated. And we look forward to partnering with the National Center, going out to Res. So we'll see you all out at Res. Thank you so much. And just before we pull the panelists up here, yesterday the governor announced his budget, and we got some information from that report. And so Samantha's going to come up and do a little impromptu briefing of the budget report, the impacts on, you know, the very, very important time and gathering that we're having here this morning. Because it's really important to also lead into the next session about where do we go from here. So we'll have Samantha just kind of give that brief update about the budget report, its potential impacts for all of us here in the room.
I just want to say what an honor it is to have Chris James here from the National Center. I told him this morning, I said, you know, when National Center was young and they started having these conferences, I was too busy doing legal work and I didn't go. And I thought, well, it's just starting up. It's probably not that important. And then my law firm boss said, you really need to go, Samantha, because this is really stuff that you do. So I went the next year and I came home with a bunch of new clients. I just told Chris, thanks to Chris and what he does, like I bring home new clients every year and my firm makes sure I go to Res every year because I get a chance to, you know, see people and I'm not with my head down. Speaking of head down, thank you again for being here, Chris. And what Chris covered, I just want to reiterate, like Chris is telling you, this guy is overseeing so many industries. I want to make sure you understand the caliber of Chris James. Chris oversees development in Indian country in all industries. And there's nothing Chris hasn't seen. And we talked yesterday about failure being beautiful. Chris has watched failure become beautiful and he's making it more beautifuler every year that he has this conference. And I asked him this morning, I'm like, how many people come? Are you going to need to break this conference into 2 conferences? Because there's like, I don't know if you guys have ever gone to Res, but it's like, it's the most natives ever. I thought the Gathering of Nations blew my mind when I was a kid, but now I go to Res and I don't even know. It's too much. It's overstimulating. There's so many natives there, and they have the entrepreneurial spirit that you guys have, which is a different groove than, you know, if you go to like NCI or government meetings. It's this powerful situation where, you know, things are really developing and there's deals made all over Vegas. And, you know, again, I'm right there in the pack with them doing good work. And thank you, Chris, for being dedicated to bringing everybody together. And, you know, in the same vein, that's what we're doing today. So thank you. And safe travels home. If you get stuck, I want to hang out with you.
I guess
Come right back here. We want you back. Well, last night, right before I took the first bite of my steak, everybody's out having steak last night. I sat down with Mary Jane. We were having steak and talking about the conference. I got an alert, and as I mentioned yesterday, we have a team of people at Corals and Brady that is constantly scouring and watching things that are happening here in Wisconsin. So one of my trackers, of course, includes cannabis, marijuana here in Wisconsin, and I have a team of 3 or 4 people. They blipped me about 7:48 p.m. last night during dinner, and they said, Samantha, they have added marijuana provisions to the Wisconsin state budget. So if you remember yesterday, we were trying to have state representatives here that didn't make it to our panel. They were out actually, and President Holsey, for example, went back to Madison to work on the budget with the legislature and with the governor. So last night, our buzz was kind of big, and I wish it was brief, but I do need to kind of read to you all the provisions. There was multiple provisions that were added to the budget involving marijuana. I myself haven't soaked this in my brain just yet, but the budget bill introduced last night is 2023 AB 43 and 2023 SB 70 featured provisions relating to legalization and regulation of marijuana. Very interesting, right? So they're planning for this. Generally, marijuana legalization and regulation. General marijuana legalization under the bill. A person who is at least 21 years or old may legally possess marijuana. A person who is at least 18 may possess marijuana if the person has certain medical conditions. Under the bill, a person may produce, process, or sell marijuana if the person has a permit. The bill creates an excise tax, of course it does, for the privilege of producing, processing, distributing, or selling marijuana in this state, and all of the revenue collected from the tax is deposited into a segregated fund called the Community Reinvestment Fund, quote unquote. Under this bill, a person who may possess medical marijuana is not subject to sales or excise taxes on the purchase or use of marijuana. The bill does not affect federal law, which generally prohibits persons from manufacturing, delivering, possessing marijuana, and applies to both intrastate and interstate violations. Current law prohibits a person from manufacturing, distributing, or delivering marijuana, possessing marijuana with the intent to manufacture, distribute, or deliver it, possessing or attempting to possess marijuana, using drug paraphernalia, or possessing drug paraphernalia with the intent to produce, distribute, or also use a controlled substance. The bill changes this. What it does is it changes state law to allow a resident of this state who is at least 21 to possess no more than 2 ounces of marijuana, and to allow non-residents of the state who are also at least 21 years of age to possess no more than 1/4 ounce of marijuana. The bill also allows a qualifying patient to possess marijuana for medical purposes. Under the bill, generally, a qualifying patient is an individual who has been diagnosed by a physician as having undergoing a debilitating medical condition or treatment, and who is over 18 years old, so not for kids. The bill also eliminates the prohibition on possessing or using drug paraphernalia that relates to marijuana consumption, so that part, of course, would have to go away. Under the bill, a person who possesses more marijuana than the maximum amount the person is allowed to is subject to a penalty, which varies depending on the amount of overage. A person who exceeds the amount by not more than 1 ounce is subject to civil forfeiture not to exceed $1,000. A person who exceeds maximum amount more than 1 ounce is guilty of a misdemeanor and subject to a fine not more than $1,000 or imprisonment, and that will not exceed 90 days in jail. The person, or both. The person is guilty of a Class 1 felony if the person also takes action to hide the amount of marijuana he or she has in place a security system to alert him or her to the presence of law enforcement, or a method to intimidate, or a system that could injure or kill a person approaching the area that is containing the marijuana. Meaning you can't make booby traps, apparently. Regulating the production, processing, and sale of marijuana. So, obviously that's the transparency provision, right? Regulating the production, processing, and sale of marijuana. Under the bill, no person may sell, distribute, or transfer marijuana unless the person has a permit from the Department of Revenue. Remember that excise tax. A person who violates this prohibition is guilty of a Class 1 felony, and the intended recipient is an adult and is guilty of a Class H felony if the intended recipient is a minor and the person is at least 3 years older than the minor. The bill requires the person to obtain separate permits from DOR to produce, process, and it requires, for the obtaining of these permits, They may differ based on whether the permit is issued by the DOR or the DATCP, but in general, a person may not obtain a permit if he or she is not a resident of the state, is under the age of 21, or has been convicted of certain crimes or committed certain offenses. In addition, a person may not operate under a DOR or DATCP permit within 500 feet of a school, playground, rec facility, childcare facility, public park, public transit facility, or library. Let's see. Under the bill, a permit applicant with 20 or more employees may not receive a permit from DATCP, so they're talking small scale, right? Or DOR, unless the applicant certifies that the applicant has entered into a labor peace agreement with a labor organization. The labor peace agreement prohibits the labor organization and its members from engaging in any economic interference with persons doing business in the state, prohibits the applicant from disrupting the efforts of the labor organization to communicate and to organize and represent the applicant's employees, and provides the labor organization access to areas in which the employee work to discuss employment rights and terms of conditions of employment. And let me just skip down to the minor portion. They're very stiff on minors possessing, and my battery's down here. Under the bill, a minor who does any of the following is subject to a forfeiture of not less than $250 or more than $500, procures or attempts to procure marijuana from a permittee, falsely represents his or her age to receive marijuana from a permittee, knowingly possesses marijuana, or knowingly enters the premises of which the permit has been issued without being accompanied by his or her parent, guardian, or spouse who is 21 years of age or older. So those are all the highlights. There's some provisions in here about previous convictions relating to marijuana, registration for THC testing labs, discrimination based on marijuana use, and drug screening and testing. So that is really what the provisions entail right now. Obviously, we just found this out last night at 7:48. We did some analysis this morning at 6 a.m. This is our synopsis of what's in the bill right now. That'll be part of, again, an ICIA service. That's what we do, is we crunch these things and give them to you so you know what's going on in the state. You can, of course, share these with your lawyers and lobbyists and get to work.
Thank you so much, Samantha. And now I'll call the next panel up to the stage, and we'll get started. Come forward, please. I have Justin Swanson, Anna Jacobs, Jeremy Wilson, James Rivera, and Marcus Greeno. Thank you again, Samantha, for that recap. I know I saw Mark running around on the phone, busy guy out in the hall. And I've actually not had a chance to check to see if Mr. Rivera was able to make it in. He was going to be flying in from New Mexico. He is from the Powake Pueblo. And with the inclement weather, I'm certain that there's probably going to be some folks caught up in the storm. Before we get started with the introduction of this panel, I just wanted to thank you all again for your dedication and commitment to learning, to seeking more knowledge. When I was the president of the National Indian Education Association, we were working very robustly with the No Child Left Behind reform, and one of the concepts that was talked about quite a bit in the work that we were doing was cradle to grave knowledge, that's what we do when we're working on our planning. We're not talking about, preschool, we're talking about babies, even in utero education, and that the knowledge work that we do and the wisdom keep work that we do is, until our last breath. And so, this is a very difficult issue to have to tackle, and so it's an honor and a privilege to be able to work with tribes that are committed to finding out this information, to find out how do we move forward, where do we go from here. And so I'm really Really happy to have the panelists that we do in front of us. And I'm going to have them tell a little bit about themselves during their introduction and a little bit about the work that they do. I could read through all their bios, some phenomenal people for you to network afterwards, but we'll just pass the mic down and have them just like tell a little bit about themselves, what brought them here, and then we'll go from there with some questions.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Anna Jacobs. I work for Michigan Medical Hemp. I'm the chief scientist. I started off with growing marijuana at the age of 14 with my grandmother in Kuwait. Kuwait's one of the most difficult climates to grow in, so she built greenhouses, and that's how I learned. She lived to the age of 101 with Parkinson's disease and had no tremors whatsoever. So I truly believe in the power of cannabis, the plant, whether it's THC or CBD. I have a long history with cannabis. I was in Kuwait at the age of 16 during the Gulf War, and I had severe PTSD, and if it wasn't for cannabis, I wouldn't be around today to actually talk to all you wonderful people and tell you a little bit about my history. Addiction was a huge factor as well with my ex-husband. He was a huge addict of opiates, and he got off of it about 6 years ago. But unfortunately, what a lot of people don't know medically, that when you take opiates over a long period of time, your testosterone starts to decrease, and eventually your androgen receptor basically fuses out. And once it fuses out, there's no way of bringing it back. He was on testosterone injections, for 3 years, and he was also on Clomid, which is a female hormone that is luteinizing hormones and follicular stimulating hormones that, when they come together, they create testosterone in the testes to send a signal to the brain, to the androgen receptor, to wake it up. And that didn't happen either. So addiction for me is a huge drive. I want to see everybody healthy, and I think with the cannabis plant being at CBD or THC, I want to be the ally to help you guys in any way, shape, or form to make everybody healthy on the inside out. And that's where happiness begins, is when you feel good on the inside, then you're always going to feel good on the outside. Thank you for taking the time.
Good morning, everybody. First, I want to apologize. My voice is deciding to leave me today, out of all days. But so if I sound like I'm 16 again, that's why. So I've been taking a lot of hot teas, helping out. So far, so good. My name is Jeremy Wilson. I'm from the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians in Cherokee, North Carolina. I spearheaded the Medical Marijuana Project for 5 years. I started that back in early 2018, and it took quite a bit to get council representatives on board. When I pushed the initiative, my community that I represented was a little over 2,000 registered voters, and very old school, a lot of churchgoers. You're in the Southern Bible Belt, and it was very difficult to explain things, how marijuana was medicinal, it was economical beneficial, but all I knew growing up was that it was the devil's lettuce. So a lot of negativity on it at that time. But we started off with hemp, and when hemp was in the green rush, we did a lot of educational factors. I held town hall meetings, had a lot of community members come in. We had a lot of education in regards to alcohol legalization outside of our casino, because our town at that time was dry. We did legalize it. So far, no issues. It's been another economical driver, but we did come into agreement that marijuana was safer. It was more health beneficial than alcohol, and be more of a benefit to economical diversification. So I actually lost my seat on council because of this issue, but that gave me more drive to continue the effort. And after my time on tribal council, I took an appointment with Principal Chief Richard G. Sneed as his governmental affairs liaison, and continued the effort from there. Worked with a gentleman named Joey Owl, who is the Secretary of Agriculture for Natural Resources with the Eastern Band, and he actually advocated this effort before I did, and submitted legislation, was successful in a period of time in 2015, but it stopped there with the chief at that time. And so I was able, on my time on tribal council, I was able to take that, resurrect it, push it forward, and today we have legalized medicinal marijuana in a state that is currently illegal. I've spent a lot of time in Raleigh talking with state legislators, Attorney General Josh Stein, Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson, Governor Coopers, office, and just many GOP legislators, Democratic legislators, and a lot of successful conversations recognizing sovereignty, how they felt about it, a lot of transparency, and that was able to provide some success for me being able to push the initiative after that. So very proud of my accomplishment on doing that. So that's why today I am now a tribal cannabis consultant. So I take my experience being a legislator, working in tribal affairs, and now consultancy for something I spent 5 years of my life on and have been successful with. So I try to promote to help other companies or tribes who are wanting to get in the industry and help to be successful in that. So the guys that I work for, they currently have the largest hydroponic indoor company in North Carolina, which is hemp right now, of course, but it's called High Culture, and you can go on Google and check that out for yourself. It's the largest in the States, and we just opened up a dispensary in Monroe, Michigan, called King of Buds. So if you want to check that out too, you're welcome to do so. But if you are looking for assistance, whether that's in tribal affairs, business, or dealing with your tribal representatives, I'm happy to help you out as much as I can. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Justin Swanson. I'm based out of Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm the current president and co-founder of the Midwest Hemp Council. We started this back in 2016, really with the first goal being to get our state of Indiana on board with taking full advantage of, at the time, the 14 Farm Bill and then the 18 Farm Bill when that did come. We set up a great program, have some of the lowest fees in the country, and a very broad-based market access to it. And really the intent from the beginning from Midwest Hemp Council after we got kind of our state in order was really to take a focus on our regional approach, recognizing one of the major shortcomings of the current marijuana industry is no interstate transportation. And that's something that the hemp industry right now has a huge advantage of. And so our goal is to try to connect the people that want to make money the right way, care about the industry, care about the plant, and here for the long term. So I feel like the Midwest Hemp Council kind of acts as a natural filtration process for actors in the industry. Chris earlier was mentioning really, there's a lot of people out there that are looking to take advantage of people just learning this industry. So just caution you to always do your due diligence, have a good attorney, and don't, if it's too good to be true, it is. There's plenty of time to really take some knowledge and apply it. I always encourage people, what are you good at now? Take that skill and figure out how you can apply that to the actual cannabis industry is a really good way to be successful. So we support the whole hemp plant, whether it's cannabinoids, fiber, or grain. I also sit on the Hemp Feed Coalition. We were the first organization back in 2021 to submit a feed application to FDA, CVM, trying to get approval for hemp as an animal feed. I think that's an area that does not get talked about enough, and I think it's a huge opportunity for folks to create a domestic supply chain, whether it's just feeding your own or a nutrition supplement for your livestock on the farm. So happy to be here, and thanks to Rob for the invite.
Poso Maniwiok, Nakato Manowich Kikitim, Kispiso Makake, Nitakayan, Mashik Nawiswan, Marcus Greeno. Hello everyone, I'm going to speak. My people, the Menominee, know me as Kispiso Makake or Swift Otter, and I was named Marcus Greeno by my parents. Before I start, I just wanted to take a moment of silence for John Trudell, our founder of Hempstead Project Heart. It was his birthday yesterday, so I'm just going to take a moment. All right. Hempstead's been around since 2012. When John was still alive, he was really big about doing whatever he could to help Alex Whitebloom. And so he started Hempstead Project Heart to raise awareness on the benefits of growing industrial hemp. And I kind of came into the fold of Hempstead when my tribe grew hemp in 2015. We got raided. I was one of the farmers on that field. And John basically jumped into action and asked for help. The funny thing about it, though, is we knew the feds were going to come in. And I actually wrote a letter to John. And I was like, hey, I need you to... need your help. I need your network. You guys need to come to Wisconsin and help us. And that was September 15th, 2015, and we got raided October 23rd, 2015. And that was like, I'll get more into that story later about John and I. I've been in hemp since 2015. Worked on a number of different things. Did a little bit of work on the hemp campaign here in Wisconsin. Did some work on the national level with the 2018 Farm Bill. I'm a seed breeder and an educator. And yeah, I mean, everything about hemp I love. Love doing it. I'm a millennial, so I'm a young person. And yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to say. I work in policy. I worked in Washington, D.C., started a number of different nonprofits, and now I'm strictly focused on policy and dealing with trying to get more leeway for us to do some work around grain and fiber exemption. So.
Well, thank you guys so much for introducing yourselves. And for the record, Attorney General Josh Kaul was also invited to this very important meeting. Just saying, as well as Governor Evers. That government-to-government relationship is so critical, and it was mentioned by Jeremy that they're moving forward, Eastern Band and Cherokee, in a state where there's no legal form of cannabis, moving forward with a medicinal model. Can you kind of just talk about what that initial meeting looked like between the Eastern Band and the state?
Sure. So we took about 2 or 3 different trips to Raleigh for different reasons. One of those was his General Counsel Eric Fletcher and a few legislators with our state lobbyists, and trying to get them to understand exactly what we were wanting to do. All of our conversations, trying to feel the room, what the temperature was, how conservative was the concern going to be in regards to marijuana being in Cherokee, North Carolina. They can't say no to what we're doing because of our sovereignty, but they can't say yes because it's federally legal. So the best approach was to just simply be understanding and transparent. Our conversations with Attorney General Josh Stein was very, very well received, and he is actually a very big advocate and a supporter of the effort, more on adult use recreational. But we wanted to stick strictly to medicinal because, like I said, talking to my community back then, even about hemp was a challenge. But through time, as we held town hall meetings and educational forums and getting to understand which one was which, one's psychoactive, one's non-psychoactive, one's more economically beneficial, one has 50,000 different uses. I mean, it's just the differences that a lot of people didn't know was educational based. And so we wanted to take that same approach to the state and let them know what we were doing. It wasn't some rogue free-for-all effort. But some of the messages that I got back from them was, you know, you guys are your own sovereign, your own sovereign nation. We can't tell you what to do. And I said, well, I appreciate you recognize our sovereignty, but this also concerns the state of North Carolina and North Carolinians. So I think it's important for us to be transparent to you about how this is going to affect your state. And so having conversations with our legislators was able to gain more respect to what we were doing and how we were going to do it. One of the legal matters for the state is that anything below 1.5 ounces is considered a misdemeanor. So writing the legislation for our ordinance was for possession, you would be maxed out at 1 ounce. And so if you assess the risk. If you come on the qual boundary, you obtain your medical card, then you were to purchase at our dispensary, and you were to go off the boundary, and then you get pulled over, and some cop who's anti-cannabis decides to take care of matters in his own, you would only be fined on a misdemeanor level up to $200. So you wouldn't be in trouble because you're under the 1.5. So we had to put a buffer zone in between there to make it, the least negative factor, basically. But as far as your question, most of it was well received. More treading lightly from GOP representatives. They did say, well, you can't do that because they can't say that because there's really no state jurisdiction. But at the same time, they can't say, yes, you can do that because it's federally legal. So my approach was to be just very respectful how they felt about it, but also understanding that it wasn't this rogue free-for-all effort, and that I appreciate them recognizing our sovereignty, but it does also concern their neck of the woods as well. So we wanted them to feel safe about what we were doing.
Thank you. And can you pass the mic over to Justin? I have a question for Justin. So Midwest Hemp Council doing a lot of work organizing, synthesizing, policy, analyzing the Farm Bill. Can you talk a little bit about, moving forward with the Farm Bill and some of the provisions that you guys have advocated for that particularly are of interest to Indian country?
Sure, and I think that's a great question because the 23 Farm Bill is, if you guys aren't paying attention to that, you need to start. This is where obviously we got the authority back in 2014 to do this and has gotten renewed every year. So the current authority will expire in September of this year. And so Congress either needs to pass a new 23 Farm Bill. If they don't meet that deadline, or reach an impasse, they'll just basically keep the status quo. We do have a divided Congress, so that's not very productive for productive policy conversations, I think, overall. I'd say the couple things we're really focused on is getting hemp eligible for specialty crop status, so we can get some grant money down to farmers to again, keep researching and investing in the space. Really interested in the hemp as an animal feed provision. We understand that's probably more of a science-based approach with FDA, but we think it's good to not only apply pressure through proposals in Congress, but also have individual states like Montana take the lead in terms of showing really the country the opportunities that exist in the cannabis plant, depending on the end use. And the other thing we're really watching closely is the definition of hemp. It's a very, very, very broad definition, and I think farmers and markets and small business owners and manufacturers are really exploring and testing the limits of that definition. And we're a little bit nervous that some of the bigger companies are coming in and wanting to change that definition of hemp in a manner that would basically take our existing hemp-derived cannabinoid market and make it available only through dispensaries. So that's something we're very, very closely watching and trying to educate Congress on the fact that farmers do have remediation options for them on the farm if they do test hot. So it's kind of a moot point to try to change that definition at this point, especially if it's not based on science. We're just going to pick another arbitrary number we think will just cause more harms in the future. So hopefully that answers a little bit of your question, but really encourage you guys to pay attention to that Farm Bill because it's going to directly impact the future of the industry.
A lot of revisions, definitely, that we need to be speaking up for. So in working with traditional farmers and working on, converting some of those traditional farmers over into hemp, they're old school. Many of them are like a background check for what, to grow a crop. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of a lowering of bar on the fiber industry side of things for sure that we need to work on. And so speaking of starting up farm crops, Marcus, can you tell us a little bit more about what that was like that first year that you guys started up your crop at Menominee? Mm-hmm. And how the elders in the community received the planting of the crops, and what was kind of the community sentiment after the raid?
Yeah, everybody hear me? Awesome. So, I think in the beginning, I guess we didn't really get our crop in until like June, because the law passed in May, and they had to work out the kinks of how to regulate it or how they're going to do the mechanism. So we did it through the College Boundary Nation because that was underneath Section 7606 of the 2014 Farm Bill. It basically said any state Department of Agriculture or institution of higher education could grow hemp for research purposes. And so we worked with the College Boundary Nation, going through all those different hoops to get to it. We didn't really plant a crop until, I think it was July 7th of 2015. And the seed was not cleaned all the way, so we had to clean it even more. So we had to go through that whole process, and then try to figure out how to find a planter. We had these consultants from Colorado who were in medical cannabis, but they never did anything with hemp. So I would like show up to the farm and they'd be on the phone talking to all these people who knew how to grow hemp. And I was just like, oh man. So seeing as how I was the only Menominee there, I'd always be like putting in the seed into the seeder, so like there was no like non-native working on it. And so we grew it, but it was all in secret that was the only downside. We didn't bring, originally I think the tribe was going to have education, people to come out to the field and learn about it and everything. They basically nixed it, and that was the reason why I came in. They were like, the consultant who was working with them, kind of the head of it all, he was a Menominee too. He's like, we need someone to come out and educate the people about hemp. And I was like, sure, I can do that. So they nixed it out of the budget. And then they're like, well, we need a farmhand. And I was like, okay. And I was like, is there any money for research? And they're like, no. And I'm like, well, I'm going to do the research because I know that, you know, if we run into a problem with the feds, at least we have some documentation showing we did some research. And yeah, it was crazy. I loved it. I'll never go back to a cubicle in the Small Business Administration after growing a hemp in a field, that's for sure. But I think that was the lessons that we learned, was that I think we needed more community engagement, and I think that there needs to be education. Because that's what John really stressed when I met him. He's like, education. That is where it's really going to happen. And looking back now and seeing what he told me in 2015 to now, it's like, wow, yeah, we got hemp legal. But now it's the part of actually teaching people, educating people, making sure that they understand the difference between hemp and cannabis. And I think that's really what comes down to it. And I guess after the raid, I remember one of the activist people in our community, his name's Guy Ryder, and he runs this group called Minneconnick, and they just brought a bunch of bison back to our homelands, which was great. But he called me, and he's all like, why didn't you tell me they were growing hemp on the res? I'm like, I had a confidentiality. I couldn't say nothing. He's like, well, you should have told everybody that the feds were going to come raid. And I was like, I didn't know that either. He's like, well, regardless, we would have came out there and like had a human shield that we would have protected the hemp field with. And I was like, we would have needed a lot of people. He's like, I don't care. We would have done it. So I think the sentiment after everything happened was that people were really interested in it. And I wish we just educated and were more public about it. I think the hard thing too is like, you don't want people coming in like taking crop out of your field and whatnot. And I get that. I had someone lift a bunch of hemp off me this past fall, which I'm not too happy about. But it comes to the territory.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So I'm just going to assume then maybe that when you guys were starting up your first cultivation that you had to source internationally for your seeds. Is that, yeah? I'm just saying, I talk to a lot of hemp farmers, and everything's always usually coming straight out of China. But, you know, and then we have wonderful domestic resources here as well. Can you talk a little bit more, Anna, about, because also carrying a name like Michigan Medical Hemp, like, you know, that's a very conscious choice to stay in an arena where you have to always be about education, about you know, making sure that the communities are knowing that this is a medical product as opposed to coming from the recreational side. So can you just talk to us a little bit more about the work that you guys are doing with seeds specifically domestically?
Hi, everyone. So Michigan Medical Hemp, we have the capacity to grow over 800,000 acres worth of seeds or flower, or if it's need be for industrial use. We sell enough seeds made within Michigan, and I think that the more we can provide an ally with everyone to be able to sell to people the seeds and provide it within the same state, the United States, instead of people outsourcing it from different countries, we have all the research and the data to back up our seeds and what they do. Our seeds are a tricop seed, which I'm assuming some people do have that. Our tricop seed, one of the best things about it is it remediates soil. And when it remediates soil, it keeps your soil clean for forever, basically. And you want to do that for your browns fields, or whether you have fields that you just want to reinvigorate. That's one of the reasons. The second thing about it is that it's used for medicinal use, and CBD is incredible. I got my son, who's 15 years old now, he got off of Adderall 3 years ago, and that was with the help of CBD, and as well as industrial use. I mean, there's a huge market for industrial use, and the owner, Bo Parmenter of Michigan Medical Hemp, patented his own idea of hempcrete, and he's built quite a few buildings so far with that, and we're not leaving any carbon imprint. So from seed all the way to production of product, including SOPs, and that's one of the arenas I love to do is writing SOPs, standardized operating procedures. I've worked with not only commercial facilities, I've worked with many laboratories in the state of Michigan to help them create rules that make sense, because every laboratory has different results with their HPLCs, whether it's pesticide testing, heavy metals. Things are very the fluctuation is too large, and it just makes no sense. I worked as a clinical laboratory scientist for 21 years at St. John, and I've seen a huge difference in terms of cannabis testing versus regular testing. And I'd like to be a part of that and be a part of the education of that for everybody involved in this room today, and more, I'm hoping. So I hope that gives everybody an idea of what Michigan Medical Hemp truly stands for. We're here to not only educate, but to help be your ally in any way you guys need us to be. We have great consultants, we have great seeds, we have a great company, and we're very passionate about what we do. I love to help people, and I love to heal people. I think healing from the inside out is very important. Thank you.
So in the state of New York, when they legalized and they were issuing all of their license and trying to figure out what their social equity program looked like, they started to have an issue with, who's going to be these farmers, and started issuing some of the first license to the hemp farmers to transition over into cannabis farming. And so this next question is for Justin. If you can just kind of share a little bit about, from your background and experience, what that transition has been like for hemp farmers that are then looking to go into cannabis. What are some of the challenges as well as the benefits?
Sure. And to be clear, Indiana, we have a just low THC hemp market, so anything above or below 0.3% delta 9 THC. So we have our program's very, very simple. The worst part about it is the background check that's required by federal law, but it's $750 for a license a year, and we have some pretty light regulations. But other than that, it's a pretty wide open market right now, and I think that's probably some of the position that the General Assembly is going to take by expanding the market. They're really using the infrastructure farmers and small businesses have built now under the existing program, and want to leverage that to expand into the rest of the market. And I think really our goal as a state is to be one of the first in the country to regulate cannabis based off of end use. So if you're grain and fiber, you guys have a different set of regulations over here. And if it's for cannabinoids, for human consumption, you're going to have a separate standard. So we're really trying to avoid the fight between marijuana and hemp, because at the end of the day, I think everybody in the room knows it's just a legal fiction that was created. And we're really trying to, I think our legislators are more comfortable rather than kind of picking and choosing and saying, hey, if you meet this set of standards, you're going to fall under this licensing requirements and whatnot. It's more of, we want to create an open market and let kind of the market decide who the winners and losers are. So that's kind of the tact I think our state's actually headed. It remains to be seen if it'll be successful, but I think we have seen when you get hyper focused on kind of picking or differentiating from different people, like in New York and Illinois, it really sets the ground for considerable corruption and kind of just nothing good that's going to help build an industry at such a young age.
So you brought up a really important, aspect is market. And so I'm thinking about, Eastern Band of Cherokee in North Carolina and what's not happening in the cannabis market over there. So you guys kind of have it cornered. Can you talk a little bit more about some of the work that you guys did and how you actually crunch numbers about what could be anticipated for your nation's economy? And you're talking your people, your citizens, as well as the population of the region. Can you just share a little bit about the insight of how you guys kind of crunch some of those numbers to forecast what that economic driver in cannabis could be?
Yeah, that's a big answer. So we are currently dealing with some issues funding-wise to support this project, and I think it's very critical that when you dive into the promises and the benefits and the potentials that your market may have, depending on where you're located, whether you're in a saturated market, a non-saturated market, those two, they're going to have different variables and different outcomes. I I can say these things because they're on public record, but some of the challenges that we face is this over anticipation of, we're going to make $300 million a year. And it's like, well, no, you're not. That's just not going to happen. So when you come to the table with your leadership or whoever that is that you're trying to get support from, going over performance, going over presentations, or how much product can you produce to support X population? What is your market? What is how far are you ahead of the state? Those are factors that we're currently dealing with. Is Cherokee's trying to be number one on the map in North Carolina, and technically we are. It's still in the building phase. We haven't opened up a dispensary yet. All those things are still being moved forward to. So when we're going to leadership and we're saying we can make 150, $350 million, like how realistic it really is that? It's not realistic in a medical market. It's not realistic when a population in your tribe is 8,000 or 9,000 people, and that's just a total population. So, and you're trying to do a medical market inside of a state that's a very large population, but how realistic can you crank that many medical cards out? So you want to be very careful from the start about how big you're trying to make your industry in the population that you're trying to do it. And when it comes to funding, for tribes can be a little complicating because depending on your economical structures, for us, we are a very big gaming tribe. And we operate everything basically 100% based off our two casinos, which is Harris Cherokee Casino Resort and Harris Valley River, which is in Murphy, North Carolina. That's our sister casino. We do have an OpCo with Caesar Southern Indiana, which is in Elizabeth, Indiana, but that's not a tribal casino. It's something similar to what you would see in Vegas, and some of the understandings between what we can use funding-wise. NIGC, National Indian Gaming Commission, states they strongly recommend that you do not use gaming funds to support a cannabis business. So for us, we do have tribal levy, but that's limited. We do have a separate LLCs that generate profit, but some of those are very extended profits, like they take a long term to actually make a profit in time. So when you're throwing millions and millions of dollars into a project, you have to make sure that first, how long is it going to take to make the money back that you just spent to uproot the industry? And then how long is it going to take to turn a profit after that? And then your operational expenses, your recurring costs, employee pay, insurance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All those things have to come in one big package in the very beginning, because we can dream all day long, doesn't mean you're going to make that dream come true. And your managing partners are going to have to be a big factor in that if you're not going to do it yourself. So, for us, we're still in the process of understanding exactly what can we do versus what we want to do. And, there's now conversation being had, do we go adult use? But when we were upstanding this industry, being in a mountain terrain is very, very difficult. And it's difficult because a small tribe like us, we're a 16,000 member tribe, but back home in the Kuala Boundary, we're small in cases of economics, housing, governmental infrastructures, things like that. So we're battling. We don't have flat land. We don't have, the capabilities to grow outdoor in 100,000 acres. I mean, we have like a 20-acre parcel that we're trying to do something with, and it's because we have floodplain issues. We have agricultural issues or wetlands or archaeological issues. So every tribe's going to have something different in comparison to another tribe or wherever you're coming from. So what I'm trying to say is, having done what I've done over the course of the last 5 years and over the course of 2021, which is when we legalized marijuana, I have gone through these pains and aches of getting to where we're established today. But it's very, very important that you identify your infrastructure, you identify your managing partners, or if you're not managing it yourself, and what is the cost going to be, and what your performers are going to be, et cetera, and most importantly for tribes, where's your funding going to come from, and how's that going to affect in return for if you're relying heavily on federal grants, state grants, things of that nature? Is that going to have an impact on those? Are your employees based upon those things? So there are a lot of different variables. So that's something that I hope, what I've learned in our process, to help others if they're dealing with the same issues.
Thank
I
you.
hope that answered your question.
Yes, no, it did. I wanted to jump back over to Marcus because, he mentioned somebody that was very impactful to my young activism world as well. John Trudell, the founder of the organization that Marcus now leads. Can you just, and I love this story, and I wanted, and I've heard it before, but I just wanted Marcus to just, kind of share how he came to the throne and leadership of Hempstead Project Heart.
So as I mentioned earlier, that letter that was sent to him, he answered it, and his right-hand woman, Faye Brown, who I consider as a mentor, she taught me the importance of planning. I was always never a planner. When I met Faye, she made me plan everything out. And I guess after the raid happened, I get a call from Faye, and Faye's telling me they want to do some work with us. And I said, great, but they raided our field. And she's like, what? And so basically John sprang into action. He got Vote Hemp to, put out a statement for us. And then he was going to start doing a legal defense fund. But then his cancer started taking over on him, and he had to be moved into hospice around Thanksgiving time. And so they told me that John is moving into hospice. He wants me to take over Hempstead and be under contract. I was like, well, I have no idea what he wants me to do. John's been an idol my whole life since I was 16, since I saw the movie Trudell. Can I come out and meet him? And they're like, yeah. He said, you can go. I was like, okay. And I was like, okay, well, how am I get to San Francisco? Well, that following day, I get a scholarship for $1,000. Like I'm always really good at. I think I made over $250,000 just writing scholarships. And so I guess my brain's worth $250,000. But so that $1,000 I put towards a plane ticket to go to San Francisco. I got a friend that lived in the Bay, stayed with him, borrowed his car, and I drove over and I met John. And it was December 4th, 2015. Sat down with him and we talked for like an hour, and it was pretty phenomenal, very metaphysical, because he literally told me that he put out in the universe he was looking for a young Native person to come over and take over Hempstead Project Heart, and he gets my letter a few days later. Weird how the universe works. But I really want to hit some of the things that we talked about in that 1 hour meeting I had with him, and that is he talked about this thing called the 5 points. And he said there's the 5 points that would help Indian country be successful in hemp. The environment, economics, climate change, historical perspectives, and tribal sovereignty. He's like, I'm not going to explain like what all those mean. I'm just putting that out there to you, and you need to figure it out. And I was like, okay, I get it, John. That's no problem. Another thing, too, is he said that the spark is going to happen in Wisconsin. And I was just kind of like, what? And what he was getting at was that if we were able to legalize Wisconsin, it would set a chain reaction. And sure enough, it did. Because after that, Alaska fell, Oklahoma fell, and they all became legal for hemp. And he said that, you know, you want to get the farmers together and you want to dig up the rich history. Well, when I met with Rob Richard at the Wisconsin Farm Bureau in 2016, it's like January 5th, 2016. And he basically was like, we had a good meeting. And then right at the end, he's like, Mark, I've been looking on this whole rich history of the Wisconsin hemp industry. I can't find it. Like, I look on the internet and I see these websites, but I can't go to the Capitol and give somebody a website. Do you have any, like, historical record by chance? Oh, well, that's no problem, Rob. Here's a flash drive. I did a lot of work in my last year of college. I was an undergrad, and I went through the Wisconsin Historical Society, went through National Agricultural Library in Beltsville, Maryland. I went through all these different news articles. And so that's really what ignited the Wisconsin Farm Bureau to really push for hemp. You know, they had a policy in place that they adopted with their membership, but it didn't really ignite the fire underneath their lobbyists until they saw the historical record. So when you talk about Wisconsin being a legal state, it's really because of John Trudell and what he told me. And I just kind of pushed everything over to help everybody out. Because I can't say I'm the only guy that made hemp legal in Wisconsin, because it always takes a coalition to make policy actually enacted. And I think one of the things, too, is that he really talked about not centralizing yourself in the movement. You know, he didn't really want me to, like, become this person that is like the go-to. And I'm starting to feel like that's where I'm at now. But I think one of the most things that make me feel so good is the fact that you got Mary Jane Oatman, you got Rob Pirro here, who's running a Climate Smart Pollution grant, which I'm really happy to see, and I'm happy to see that's happening here in Wisconsin. It's doing everything around fiber. And it just shows me that it's like, okay, like, doesn't always have to be Mark to do it. There's other people out here who are doing amazing things. And that just makes me feel really good, because it's really coming to life what John wanted. And so.
Thank you so much, Marcus. I've known Marcus since he was just a little boy. I mean, just a young boy. When I was working in Indian education policy, met him in Washington, D.C., and he was out doing some phenomenal things. Bright person. I'm actually going to open it up to you all for some questions of our panelists now, because we have some wonderful experts ahead of you, and would love for you guys to have the opportunity to engage with them. Any questions for our panelists? Tina.
Tina Begay with Red Tail Accounting, but I'm just kind of just a little shook that you shared with us that he's no longer with us. I've been teaching at a tribal college I shared with the group yesterday, but one of the videos that I would show is called Standing Silent, and he's in that video, and just an amazing person. And if any of you, just a comment, if any of you haven't ever seen the video or watched it, I highly recommend it. I don't know if you can get it on Amazon. Does anyone know? Has anyone watched Standing Silent? Have you seen it? It's a very good documentary on Alex Whiteplume. Are you aware of it?
Yeah, actually, it's the video that got me into hemp, really. Yeah, Standing Silent Nation, you can get it at Vision Makers. I think they're based in Lincoln, Nebraska. And you can buy a DVD from them. I think you can find something on YouTube to see it.
I think he was the one in there where at some point the FBI, they're talking about if the FBI is going to come in, and he's like a little cocky, and he's like, go ahead and let them come in if they want to. And then the next thing you hear, the helicopters come in, and then they have their guns and everything, and then they wipe down all the crop. And it was just so, such a powerful movie, but his tenacity and his commitment to the cause was so powerful. And so I'm just really saddened to hear that today. But thank you for your work that you do. And if anyone is in hemp or wanting to work in Indian country, I highly recommend that you watch that documentary.
So Uncle Alex is still alive. John Trudell passed away.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, no, I want to meet Uncle Alec too. That would be so awesome.
All right, Marcus, I have another question in your direction. So, since the pandemic, a lot of things have slowed down, but not for Hempstead Project Heart. Can you just kind of talk about, how busy you guys have been since the globe had a reset with the pandemic?
Yeah. We started working with the College of Miami Nation. We got a Native American Agricultural Fund grant to basically conduct a feasibility study on fiber and actually develop a Great Lakes acclimated fiber variety. And so for the past 3 growing seasons, we've been growing it. We use 3 different land-raised varieties that actually come from a collection that Winona LaDuke has now. And it's been going really good. We've been getting really good results on it. I'm looking forward to utilizing that in the Great Lakes region, hopefully expand out into the Great Plains. So it's about 3 years in acclimation, got another 5 years to go for acclimated, and then start pushing it out more to the tribal communities. Another thing, too, we're doing at the college is we got a big USDA hemp supply chain grant. We work with Central State University in Ohio, a couple other University of Kentucky, University of Mississippi. And basically what they're doing is they're looking at hemp feed for fish. And so one of the nice things about the grant is that we basically can create our own research center at the College of Miami Nation focused on hemp. So our first research is dealing with these fish, but I'm going to expand more into bass fiber, probably integrated pest management. I've been working on a grant through USDA, the SARE grant, Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education, and I'm looking at the Japanese beetle infestations and seeing if they're only applicable to one variety, which they're not. They're applicable to all hemp varieties, but they don't seem to be as a nuisance. Actually, I think they just come to the hemp to mate and procreate, and then they go off. So it's pretty interesting that I'm seeing. I'm in my final year of doing research on that. And then, where's my notes? And then we're very deep into the grain and fiber exemption campaign for the 2023 Farm Bill. Basically what that says is anybody who's growing grain or fiber is exempted from growing hemp, exempted from testing. They don't have to do any background checks, and they protect people who develop their own seed varieties. So there's no value like certified seed. I know a lot of people are like big about certified seed, but I'm like, when it comes to tribes, we're not going to buy seed off people. We're going to make our own seed. We're going to develop it. It's only going to be applicable to those regions. And I think that's the big thing that I'm really big about with the grain and fiber exemption. So if you guys want to know more about that, it's called the Agricultural Hemp Solutions Organization. They're the lead of it. And it sounds like they're going to introduce that legislation soon in the 118th Congress, probably on the Senate side.
Thank you so much for that, Marcus. And we'll bounce over to Justin, because you mentioned opportunities through the USDA. Justin, can you just talk a little, not like even, figures, but just kind of some of the programs that are available under the USDA for building that capacity for new and beginning farmers?
Yeah, so right now the biggest hole we have in terms of getting money down into the farmers is that hemp doesn't qualify as a specialty crop. So our ask is that it's twofold. It's for the grain as well as the floral material off the plant. Rob may be better equipped to speak about the grant opportunities. He's successful in getting that. But hemp was a very, very, very small part of that overall funding package. But it is, I think everybody knows, this industry is all about incremental progress. And the fact that hemp was actually acknowledged in this and not forgotten about like it has in the past is a big step forward. So in terms of grants, I think Mark's probably your guy to answer that. He's got $250,000 brain there. So, but my point is, if we don't start talking and asking our representatives to be included in these conversations, we're not going to be. And I think the industry did a great job with the Climate Smart Solutions grants, making it known, taking the time to put applications in. We weren't successful, but very, very happy for those that were, and we look forward to future opportunities. But at the end of the day, we're going to get what we get from the government. If we don't ask for it, we're not going to get it, and we need to keep showing up. I know that probably doesn't answer your question. I'm sorry.
No, that's you did.
So yeah, there's a lot of opportunities in the USDA and kind of the ag sector, but like other opportunities, and they're having conversations last night, and I would have added more to my talk yesterday. I just kept thinking about these things. But in the National Institutes of Health, there are small business innovation grants, SBIR, and small business technology transfer grants. And if I don't know if anybody's been involved in utilizing those grants from the business sector to the health sector. Have you heard of anybody applying for those SBIR, SCTR type NIH grants?
I was working with a group. It's called Green Arrow, and I don't work with them anymore because they kind of veered off what they originally were doing. But they wanted to create a hemp rocket fuel, basically burning hemp shiv and basically consolidating in so that you have the ability to pull like propane off it or different hydrocarbons. they were looking at trying to do the SBIR grant through NASA to see if they could utilize that as something. But I think they basically changed directions on hemp from using it as a rocket fuel to using it as a remediation tool, because they had a lot of different tribes in like Canada that they were utilizing hemp for like basically cleaning up all the land that they had. So I'm aware of NASA, but I wasn't aware of National Institute of Health. So that's a good note.
The follow-up question real quick is, what has the relationship been in the grant sector with the tribe? Like, has it been like a good relationship? Has it been productive and collaborative with your USDA or ag grants and the tribe?
I think that it's always interesting, especially with grants, especially when you get in with PhDs and doctorates, because they kind of want to have their stake a claim of how they want to do things. They're always saying, stay within your lane. So I think that when it comes to working with the tribe itself, Menominee itself hasn't really said yes to hemp again, but I think what it is really about is about educating the membership so that they can leverage against the tribal leadership. But in terms of grants and how we do things, everything's basically been going through the tribal college, and that's where a lot of the funding is basically being diverted to. And then in terms of the tribe itself, I think they're working on renewable energy, and that's where I'm kind of moving hemp and hemp batteries into that concept to them, because I think that's a really good opportunity. So that's kind of where I'm seeing it all, is really staying on the outside but trying to push as much leverage as I can in. That's kind of how I did with Wisconsin and getting hemp legal here. Is like I didn't really was like the face of it. I kind of worked with a lot of other people to kind of push them into that direction. I think that's always a really good bet. But yeah, when it comes to grants and working with tribes, it's always fishy. But I think with the tribal college, it's a little bit easier, especially if you build a relationship with them and like really have a good, sound relationship with the president, the dean, the researchers. I think that's really where a lot of good things can happen.
That's what we talked about yesterday. STEAM, science, technology, engineering, agriculture, math, that cannabis really is, within that realm. And I had a really interesting conversation the other day with Anna in regards to the work that they're doing at Michigan Medical Hemp. And then I heard the word brought up yesterday again, tissue culture. And so I wanted Anna to just share a little bit about her nerd self and what she's doing with tissue culture.
So when we have a plant that's diseased, obviously not completely systemic, because if it's systemic or if it's a viroid, it's near to impossible to actually get it clean, just like our own bodies, our own immune systems. So with tissue culturing, you go to the apical shoot of the plant, and there's cells called meristem cells. Those cells are taken down, and you don't want to go too far down either, because then they're vascularly still attached to the mother plant. So you want to take it about 3/4 of an inch, and then you want to dissect those cells into really small amounts. It has to be in an aseptic environment underneath a fume hood, and you want to use agar, root hormones, and you want to use sugars, and there's other things that you'd add to it. I had 2 plants that one died, unfortunately. I had a blueberry that I crossed with a UK cheese. She lived for 13 years, and I was grateful, but when I tissue cultured her, she didn't make it because she got mold in her, so I couldn't save her. Then I had a critical kush that I had for 13 years, and I tissue cultured her, and luckily enough, I did the meristem tissue culture. I got 5 mom plantlets, and she's been around for over 16 years. So I'm super proud of tissue culturing. I think it's a great way to reinvigorate your plants and to keep them around for as long as you need them, especially if they have the terpene and the cannabinoid profile that you're looking for and looking to keep. That would be the best way to do it and the cleanest way to do it.
Thank you. I wanted her to share that because I think that the vast amount of knowledge that is here on the stage is very robust, and it definitely leads to that conversation of, where do we go? Where do we move forward from here? And so I'm going to have each one of the panelists inspire Wisconsin with that, question based on their knowledge and experience. What can they share for Wisconsin moving forward? We'll start with Anna.
Well, for Wisconsin, we would love to be your ally, and we would love to help you propel in any way we can from our seeds based out of Michigan, which I really encourage people to buy seeds within the United States instead of buying seeds outside of the United States, because we do a lot of data, we do a lot of research on our seeds, and we make sure everything that we do send out to people, it's always clean. We have not only great seeds, but we have great things that comes with the seeds. Like I said, the tri-crop element for me is like having one seed that can do 3 different things in terms of phytoremediation, in terms of medicinal use, and because there's such a high percentage of addiction within this world, I would love to see that addiction go down with the use of CBD, because CBD has like an 87% rate of success when used properly to help people get off of the pharmaceuticals. And I don't want to see people die. I want to see people heal from any conditions that they have. Justin did mention something about animals earlier and grazing, and I thought that was a wonderful thing that you had mentioned. When people grow seeds, when people grow hemp seeds on their farms, their animals, before it became illegal in 1937, the animals were able to graze on hemp. And when they grazed on hemp, all of us, we ate the animals, we ate their meat, and we were able to have no GI problems. Since 1937 to today, we have so many gastrointestinal issues with everyone, and this is because they made hemp illegal. And now that it's legal again, I would love to be part of helping Wisconsin to heal and their animals heal and no one gets sick, and we're all in an environment where people are healing, their animals are healing, their land is healing, and we're leaving Mother Earth with less of a carbon imprint than we had before. Thank you. Oh, you got one?
Thanks.
I think Wisconsin, first of all, has to remove the stigma. Stigma is always one of the first things that has to be removed in order to plant the seed for marijuana to thrive wherever it's being challenged against. Speaking upon my experience, that was exactly the challenges that I had faced. And then from there, it was education. Then it was creating relationships, and then it was forms of transparency about what our game plan was, and the priorities of which route or which side of the fence does Wisconsin find as more beneficial than the other. Is it more for medicinal purposes? Is it more for economy? From a recreational standpoint, it's going to be based more on the economy more so than medicinal. Although you can factor the two in with each other, there's one going to be more dominant than the other. So for us pushing medicinal, it was always the addiction issues. It was the substance abuse. It was alcoholism. It was the PTSDs from domestic violence. It was those sort of things. And so we wanted to find an outlet for those who were resorting to prescription medications and then having to do the fallout of addiction from that, which is a stronghold back home, dealing with fentanyl, dealing with prescription opioids, things of that nature, alcoholism, and it affects a lot of other tribes as well. I don't think there's nothing that's just specific to one tribe that one tribe isn't already experiencing itself. It's just the leadership that takes one issue more seriously than the other. So for Wisconsin, we have a room and we have a panel and leadership that's in here that's going to be very beneficial in its own sectors. And for myself, it's more on the affairs, the governmental affairs point of view, and how to create relationships, creating understanding, education to the legislators who aren't exactly on par with the realities of what marijuana can be beneficial to its state and its residents.
So Indiana's very similar political makeup to Wisconsin and North Carolina. It's all 3 conservative states at the end of the day. It sounds like a broken record, but really is education. And in terms of creating new policy and the intersection of policy, law, and politics, really probably the simplest way to say it is your goal as an industry is to make bureaucrats look good, right? Help them understand where you guys are trying to go and show them the benefits of doing that. Because if they're unsure or not completely confident or trustworthy of what you're telling them, their status quo is going to be nothing. So I think the biggest thing that the industry can do is what you're doing today: gather, consolidate, really have a unified message when you go and talk to the various stakeholders. Because the worst thing when you're trying to create new policy, the worst thing a legislator can say to you is, well, I haven't heard from anyone in my district about this, so why do I care about it? So it's really about doing the legwork up front, outside of session, leading up to session, and really making sure that you have a clear path of what you're asking for and be able to explain it in 30 seconds why it's good for the state and why it's good for this legislator to be in favor of that. So just really encourage you guys to do what you're doing, support Mary Jane, support Rob, support the organization, because it really takes leadership to move the ball forward.
Well, the thing I'm probably going to end it with is basically some of the lessons we learned getting hemp legal here. So it's as we, get ready for medical. I don't know if we'll have adult, but we'll have medical. I think some of the things that we should think about is, one, we have to figure out what our allies are in whoever Republicans are in the legislature, and we need to go to their districts and we need to start educating their constituents. That's how we did it to get hemp legal here. Some of the different representatives and senators that we had people throughout the state go and meet with them and say, hey, I think this is important. You need to make it legal. Next thing we need to do is we need to have tribes engaged, which I'm really happy that we're all in here and we're tribal representation. But the big one, and he's standing way in the back, Daniel Guzman, Oneida has a really good lobbyist. The only reason why I say that is because when I worked on getting hemp legal, I was working with all these different lawmakers, and one of them in particular was like, I was telling them, I'm going to be working with Oneida, and they're like, oh, well, who's their lobbyist? And they look up who it is, and they're like, oh, okay. And I was like, and they were like really impressed by the lobbyist that Oneida retains. And they were saying, well, if you look at this, and so they went back and looked at some legislation. Their lobbyist was able to circumvent the town of Hobart to get them their liquor license. And that was like probably the coolest thing ever, because you actually read inside there, it circumvented any power that Hobart had over that liquor license to where the state authorized Oneida to do it. So when you look at that, you need a super lobbyist or a couple of them. The next thing you need to do is you need to really start engaging social media. Get the young people in there. That's what we did. We really started getting into that. And what was really funny about it was that we started pushing Walker at the end when he was like basically ready to sign it, and we started pushing Instagram posts, Facebook posts, all those different things. And it wasn't necessarily saying hemp or cannabis. We were just saying support this bill. And what I found really funny about it was afterwards, because you have to register as a lobbyist here in the state of Wisconsin after you lobby for 5 days. I was reading all the new rules, and one of the new rules was anytime a lobbyist does any social media work, they need to track it. And then they started saying, here's an example. Call the governor and represent da-da-da-da-da. And I was like, that was good. That was a good one. That was a good one. Because they had a ton of people calling them. Over 2,500 people made calls to Governor Walker. So go back. Targeting. People who are really big about it, big about medical cannabis. Another thing, too, is making sure you have those super lobbyists on your hands. Go brush shoulders with Guzman. And then make sure you have enough support to ignite the base, so young people. And how are you going to get them? Snapchat. You're going to get them through Instagram. You're going to probably get them through maybe Facebook. But those are some of the big things that we did to make sure hemp got legal here in the state. And obviously, the big interest groups. But you're not going to get the Farm Bureau. You're not going to get those people on board because I don't know if they're really for it. Hemp was a little different. But that's my case in terms of motivate, encourage, and inspire Wisconsin to finally get legal. Because, man, medical cannabis, I think it's going to really do a lot of good things for us. So.
All right, how about a big round of applause for our panelists? Thank you guys so much. And then you guys can go ahead and take your seats, and then I'll call up the fire station crew. You guys ready? Yep, fire station. We're going to have Stosh and Logan do another presentation, and then we'll start to get things wrapped up. I appreciate it. Drink up lots of coffee, conference bags. If there's any extras out there, take 1 or 2 home with you, because I can't bring anything home with me.
Thanks everybody again for having us. We're super excited to be here, and we just love to see all the progress that we are seeing down here, and seeing how progressive and how in front of everybody, in front of everything that everybody's getting. So it's really great to see this.
Yeah, just wanted to piggyback on that and say thank you all for including us this weekend. It's special to be here and hear about all the work that everyone's pushing forward on cannabis. So.
Louder. Got it.
Okay, so about our company, we were formed in 2017, but we didn't open our first location until October of 2019. It took almost 2 years of politicking and working with local municipalities in the UP to get them to opt in and allow for cannabis.
And to kind of get into the reason and everything that we're getting into, and the reason we're talking today is to help educate, and that's the biggest reason we're here, to help tribes understand like the regulatory framework, and in our experience is limited to Michigan, but what we've seen and what we're able to do. And so like that's why we talk about like what we have done and what we are doing, is to show the amount of red tape and the amount of landmines that we've walked through in this industry, and things that we can shed guidance on to prevent those same mistakes from happening in the future when tribes go to set up their framework.
A little history here showing the timeline of our stores. So, like I said, founded in 2017, opened our first store in 2019. Fast forwarding, after we had opened our second store, the Hannahville Indian community had reached out and wanted to have a conversation about how we could be involved in consulting. And we're both growers by trade. We also had been involved in the retail. And what ended up happening with that relationship was a beautiful partnership. We essentially said, you know, if we could do two options, either consult or do a white glove model, where we essentially come in and provide the infrastructure, the support. We run the store. We hire tribal members to be in the store and run it like a true partnership. And it really kind of opened our eyes to say, okay, you know, we can provide a lot of value here.
And talking about the value that we were able to provide, like when Hannahville and when the tribe reached out to us and they asked us to come in and to help perform and help them navigate like the murky waters of cannabis in Michigan, and looking at the competitive landscape and looking at everything we've done, it was great for us to be able to work with them, work with the Michigan Attorney General's office. We had several phone calls and conversations of what it would look like in changing state policy to be able to give the tribes a more advantageous position when it came to cannabis in the state of Michigan. And I think that a lot of that framework and all of that policy change is what we're going to have to see here in Wisconsin. And so making sure that the lobbyists and the people who can change the policies that you are friends with or associated with are the people that you're really pushing to make sure that the policies and things that get passed are keeping the tribes in mind when they do get passed.
Perfect. Yeah, and I'm skipping through here to kind of get to some of the more relevant slides that would be applicable to everyone in the audience here, because marijuana impact studies, you know, these were a lot of things that we had to search for and show municipalities, but in a way, tribes are very similar to municipality, and in fact greater, because it's its own nation, right? And so to really convince your tribe or to work through the issues, you have to look at areas that have already legalized cannabis or have already been exposed to these issues and say, okay, well, how is this going to affect our community? In what way do we want to regulate cannabis? And that's another way that we get involved and come and give presentations and explain, okay, these are the effects, these are the things that we've studied, this is the data that we've looked at, and this is what we think the impact would be on the area.
Yeah, the most important thing is just having data-driven decisions, you know, like being able to go to council members that are unsure or maybe don't have the same education or don't have the same exposure as others do, being able to go to council members with data-driven decisions and show them like, hey, this is great. These are the things that, you know, there's so many states that have passed. I mean, Wisconsin is somewhat late to the party if you look at how many states have already passed. So we have the data now. You know, previous states didn't. Now we do. So we can prove the benefits of cannabis. So similar to the synopsis we got this morning in the bill that was introduced in Wisconsin last night, which is really cool to hear. Michigan marijuana tax structure is very similar, and there's an excise tax that's placed upon cannabis. And again, when we talk about the people who have the ability to change policy and make sure the policy has the tribes in mind, the Michigan excise tax doesn't allow for that excise tax to come back to the tribe, even though they operate as a municipality. All the other municipalities get access to that excise tax, and it comes back to like the city of Marquette, the city of Negaunee, and all of our other locations. But we have a location in Hannahville on sovereign land. The tribe receives no tax benefit. So we're currently working with the state of Michigan to make sure that those excise tax dollars that are collected from that location, we can get those dollars back to the tribe. Like, it's super important. So understanding that when you are lobbying and making sure that we are writing policies, to keep that in mind before things get put into place, and then you're fighting upstream against something that's not advantageous to the tribes.
Yeah, in case anyone's not aware how the tax schema works in Michigan, is the 10% excise tax goes into a general coffer, a general fund, and then it's distributed amongst the municipalities by how many licenses they have. Well, when the law was written, it wasn't written to include tribes as municipalities, even though through a compact they operate as such. So one of the important things to remember when you're talking to the legislator and pushing for cannabis change in any state is remembering that if there are going to be these compacts, the tribe should be included on that tax revenue. You know, if you're going to allow the state police or whatever governing agency to come in and regulate the marijuana, well, then you should also see the upside of the tax benefits.
It's another massive revenue source that the tribes are missing out on right now. And again, we are fighting to try to change it, but let's stop the problem before it happens here. And so across the state and like what we see, so there's I'm familiar with 5 tribes in the Upper Peninsula, and that's where we operate. And I think every single one of them has a different approach to how they're taking on the cannabis industry. And some of them, like Bay Mills, for example, they did it all on their own. They're vertically integrated. They don't integrate with the state system. They don't integrate with Metric. Other tribes have hired, 2 of the other tribes have hired management companies to come in and put stores in and run and operate. Our situation is a little different. We were in true partnership with the tribe. We came in and we offered a white glove service, so we handle everything from like financials, marketing, human resources, licensing, compliance, inventory, top to bottom, architecture, design, build out. We do all of that, and that way we can get the tribes online way faster than like your traditional methods without the infrastructure and support behind them. And then there's like LVD, they're still working on getting their cannabis set up, you know. So there's plenty of different ways to skin the proverbial cannabis cat, and so you have to figure out what's right for your tribe, and then just take all of the education and data and resources that everybody can offer, and then make your decision from there.
And expanding on that further, picture of our team here. So on top of the 8 retail stores that we currently have, we have an administration team that's set up to provide cannabis support, right? And the average time from idea to conception for us on a new retail location is about 6 months, right? Obviously, there's unknown variables of working with municipalities, but we really have built over the last 4 years an administrative team that's housed and built to scale. And that's one of the areas that we provide value. And when we're meeting with tribes or other companies, you know, we tell them it's like, okay, you have the option to pick and choose what it is that you'd like to do and what it is that you'd like help with. And if you don't need any help at all, that's great. But if there are things that you'd like to help with, we have a whole team backing that can provide support in a vast number of areas, especially when it relates to cannabis.
And on top of that, when you look at the cannabis industry as a whole, generally everybody looks at it as somewhat of like a get-rich-quick scheme in the beginning, but we're trying to build companies that are here to last. And when inevitably 5 years after it's passed, there's going to be a cannabis store on most corners, and there's going to be a lot of competition in the area, what's going to separate these businesses from the ones that are just coming in? And so time to market and time in market and having a brand identity. If you can form a relationship with these customers and have a long-term a long-term appeal to get them to continue to come to your establishments and purchase your products, then when other competitors do come in, you're gonna be able to maintain that, because it's the years 5 and on is where we're trying to build companies that are gonna last, and they're gonna go through the wave of the industry. And so keeping that in mind, and the tribes have a unique opportunity here to be able to get to market faster. A lot of municipalities may be against cannabis, and so they're not going to allow them. It's cannabis passed in Michigan in 2018. It's still 2023, and we're fighting to open stores. It's been 5 years. We're going to see the same pattern in Wisconsin, where municipalities, let's say like Green Bay, doesn't want to allow it. Well, there may be trust land or tribal land close to that where you can operate and take advantage of that. So getting to market quicker has never been more important. It is the number one priority when you look at this, to make sure that you build a company and a brand that is going to resonate and is going to be able to withstand the waves and the crushing competition and the prices drop that we see in every other state that's gone legal.
And so as time goes on, it really the time it takes for a market to saturate really increases. When Colorado went recreational, it was a good 5 to 6 year run before they hit the bottom of their market. In Michigan, it took us 3 years. We're getting to the point when we first opened our company, we couldn't find marijuana. We were calling and begging vendors to sell us flower. Well, 3 years later, fast forward, here we are. Vendors are begging to sell us flower because it's oversaturated. Grows are a dime a dozen. And so there really is a faster window, and it is a beautiful opportunity for tribes to open before there's municipal legislation. It's a beautiful setup.
And to talk on a couple of the options, again, like I spoke earlier on Bay Mills, how they're completely vertical integrated, and they're signing no compacts with the state, and they're doing their own thing. And we're talking about multiple ways to structure this. And then with signing a compact or a waiver of sovereign immunity to let the state come in and regulate the facility, if that's a route, and that is a route that tribes can go with. And by doing this, it gives the tribes access to the entire statewide system. So if a tribe was to build a grow, now they have access to sell to every dispensary in the state versus just the ones on sovereign land. And so tribes need to make a decision on how they want to structure their business, whether they want to do it all in-house and they want to keep it all there, or if they want the opportunity to scale a business that has the opportunity to sell to every dispensary in the state and take advantage of the 6 million residents that live in Wisconsin. Or don't quote me on 6 million, but I think it's close to that. So, but anyways, there's a couple options that you can look at, and deciding which one's best for you is never been more important.
Our experience in working with Hannahville Indian community, it took a lot of conversations for both parties for us to come up with something that really worked. Ultimately, we reached an agreement where they had a building that worked. We provided all the design expertise, the store layout, the branding, the staffing. I mean, like I said, it was truly a white glove experience. They decided to, originally we had discussing plans of tax, and ended up moving more towards a tariff model, which worked out nicely. And so there's many options in how partnerships can be structured, and the beautiful part about that location is it has access to metric, right? So we're able to get products on tribal land where the tribe is benefiting, but they're still pulling products from around the state, which really provides the access to the best medicine Michigan has to offer.
Yeah, and to expand on like our current deal and our structure with the tribe, I know yesterday we had a pretty in-depth discussion, and thanks Tina for your input on the 280E tax. But by setting up an excise tax with the tribe, we were able to get the funds to the tribe without having to expose the tribe to the federal 280E, and so therefore the tribe isn't paying that federal tax, or is paying a lower amount. And so it's a way for the tribe to be able to partner, bring in an outside firm to, like ourselves, to be able to come in and operate and run everything, help them set up time to market, because we all know the licensing and compliant aspect is extremely difficult. Getting licensed with the state of Michigan, it can take time. Getting pre-approved, getting everyone on board to make sure that everyone is qualified to receive a marijuana license. Whereas with our structure, we set up an excise tax. We can cut them an excise tax check just like we do with the federal government or the state government, and we are the ones with the license, so it's time to market way faster. You can get the store open quicker without having to wait with, oh, can this person get qualified? Do we want to own the licenses? Are any funds at risk? Well, we can bypass all of that with structures like this. We spoke on competition and customer preferences. Yeah. So again, obviously a shameless plug, but we are here to offer opportunities to work with us on I guess dispensaries, processing, grows, the whole top to bottom. We want to be able to come in and offer services, and if we fit, if there's an opportunity for us to work together or partner or be able to help in any capacity, we're here. And we'd also we'd encourage you to reach out to Hannahville and see how their experience was with us, and how they're excited to renew their contract. They don't want us to leave, and they love what we're doing there. And it's just an opportunity for us to be able to work together and to be able to build a brand or build a company that can diversify like Tribe's portfolio and find other revenue streams that are going to be great for Tribes.
Yeah, and if there's any leaders out there too, one of the things that we like to do is offer tours as well. Before even having these conversations, we like to just invite people out to dinner and come take a look at one of our current facilities and what does it look like, and really discuss, look, and feel the models that we've currently set in place. So just wanted to throw that out there too. If anybody's interested in coming to one of our locations in Michigan to actually see and experience what it's like, something we'd love to assist with. And obviously, just like Stosh said, once we get to a point where there's mutual understanding, there's multiple ways where we could potentially add value and help.
So that's about the short of it, or the long story. Does anybody have any questions about us or about partnering with Tribes or any other structures that we may be able to offer any guidance or anything on?
I'll ask a question, except I won't shout it. Michigan's plummeting cannabis prices. So,
Yes.
Once you kind of get into the midst of it and the bubble, pops, what are you guys doing to kind of prepare for what's coming with the price drops and, retaining employees and making sure your shops stay open?
So for us, the biggest thing for when you're trying to continue to grow a company and make sure that we're making the correct decisions is looking at feasibility studies before we choose new locations, right? So we're seeing price compression, and the competition is getting stiffer. And so making sure that we're making investments, but most importantly, not over-investing. We're seeing a lot of grows in Michigan that are going to go out of business here in the next 18 to 24 months because the market is oversaturated. So the one thing that we can't stress enough is making sure that we're not over-investing into these companies because of the wave that happens, and we've seen it in every state that's happened. So instead of investing, we see so many grows investing $100 million into a grow. Well, do you really need a $100 million grow, or are you going to see a return on your money? How long is it going to take to see that back? Or do you need to build something that's going to suit like your plans for the next 3 to 4 years, and then you can talk about scaling? So over-investing is a big thing and a big problem that we're seeing in the state of Michigan. Lucky for us, we've avoided the growing aspect of the industry simply because we saw this coming. Generally, the cost per pound to grow is like anywhere from 75 cents for outdoor to $1.30 per gram, which works out to be like $400 to $600 per pound to grow. Currently in the state of Michigan, we're seeing wholesale flower go from $450 to like $700 per pound. So at that rate, investing all that capital and to not even see a dollar of profit, just enough to pay the bills, like you'll never get ahead. So making sure that you're not over invested, I think, is the biggest thing, and making the decisions to invest in the areas that you think are going to be long term and successful. places to go?
Yeah, other areas include our efficiencies. So something that's unique to our organization that we looked at is how many resources do we need at each location. So at every store that we have, there's a whole team that's dedicated to actually packaging marijuana, and they're spread out at each location. We said, okay, that's not efficient for us, and so we essentially built a central distribution hub. So all of our products come in from around the state to one hub. They're packaged, stickered, labeled, entered into our system. And so now it gives us the opportunity, A, to build our stores at least 500 to 700 square feet smaller because we don't need that additional square footage. And it also allows products to arrive ready to go on the shelf, and it allows you to decrease the amount of inventory that you have on hand. So that was a huge efficiency step that we took. Other areas is our customer service. I think it was very clear that when we opened, we didn't have security guards with big guns standing outside our facilities. Our motto was it should be cannabis culture. It should be like buying weed from your friends, and that was ultimately what we pushed. Not in an unsafe way. I mean, we have one of the most high-tech security systems with I don't know, that you could find in the state. Anyways, it's facial recognition, vehicle license plate tracking, but the experience when you come into our shop, it's beautiful, it's creative, there's murals on the walls. We put a lot of time and energy into what the experience is like, and that goes a long way. And the education for your customers too, we can't stress that enough, is giving people the experience they want, because all it takes is one bad experience for them to say, well, I'm going to go to one of the other 6 shops in town. And even though we were the first to market, it's very clear that every day, working to maintain that reputation that took years to build. So.
Yeah. To reiterate Logan's comment, by being able to cut 500 to 700 square feet off of each location, everyone knows building costs are through the roof. I mean, looking at $400 a square foot, like we're talking serious savings by being vertical and being efficient. We have an in-house like automation specialist and data specialist. They're going through, and we're trying to automate as much of the process as we possibly can to save where we can, to ensure that we're not overspending on this, or are the paper clips in the wrong spot in the store, to make sure that we're saving on even the tiniest things, to ensure that we're not overspending in places that we shouldn't be. Efficiency, while it may be easy in the start, you need to build a company for when things get tougher, and that's the mindset you need to have.
And I'm hoping Tina can vouch for me, but our attitude has always been it's not if we're going to get audited, it's when we're going to get audited. So inventory is top of mind. We use barcode scanning on every single one of our products. We're very diligent about who we allow to work with our inventory, and we're auditing on a weekly basis and meeting with each individual store, because I can't express to you enough how big of a monster and a beast tracking inventory is. And so that's one of the things we've gotten good at. When you have a high volume location, we had our doors blown off when we opened our first shop. I mean, we had 2 cash registers, we had a line 2 miles long, and we had over 50 employees. We had more employees than we were allowed to have in our building at one time. It was incredible. It was an incredible opportunity. It was explosive growth, but it didn't mean that we couldn't be diligent. And I think the 2 of us, we worked 16-hour days religiously for months, and we learned a lot along the way.
Yeah.
I have 2 questions. The first one is this: when you say 400 per square foot, is that the cost that you found over your 8 locations? It basically costs from beginning to end to open?
Yeah.
So
and
say a 1,000 square foot small store would cost 1,000 times 400.
Yeah, roughly. Yep. I mean, and it fluctuates depending on builder and how sophisticated or how basic you want to make the store. But again, costs are rising. We did not pay that when we opened our first one pre-pandemic in 2019, but things are creeping above 400 a square foot now.
And that's like metric everything all included, right? Or whatever it would take to open.
Yeah,
up,
that's
right? Okay.
that's
all in.
That's turning the open sign on.
Got you. The other question I have is, we're seeing a glut in the market everywhere, legal, black market, etc. You mentioned the prices. As buyers and as for 8 locations, maybe you can comment on what kind of differentiation are you seeing as a result of the glut? Are you seeing, or are you able to cherry pick better quality? Are you going to growers and saying, listen, if you were more organic, if you tasted better, what are you seeing? What are you trying to leverage? And maybe any advice you could give to anybody besides scaling properly, what could we do to give ourselves a leg up in the glut market? Thanks.
I was
So-
going to say, from our standpoint, we feel distribution is everything, and that's part of the reason why we never invested in growing. We have the opportunity to see everything and what the entire state has to offer, right? So, if grower A brings us great product, 10 harvests in a row, and we love it, well, the 11th through 15th harvest are not very good. We have the opportunity by not having to purchase that, and we want to make sure that relationships are most important, and we want to support our growers. But ultimately, if someone delivers a product that's less than satisfactory, or if someone's overcharging for a product, I mean, everyone's in tune with the market, and they can realize pretty quickly there's reasons why these retailers are not making these purchases. So, I mean, ultimately, the retailers hold the cards in the marijuana industry, and it seems as though that's the way it is across almost every state.
The advice I'd give too is building a brand and holding your brand value. The one thing we see is our consumers don't have a palate. In a new market, we're showing them, hey, these are all of your product options, right? And it takes them a long time to figure out which products are good. One of the things we experience living in the Upper Peninsula is we have a low household economic income, right? So a lot of people were coming in going, what's the cheapest flower that's the most THC? And it takes a long time to tell them. You don't go to the liquor store and say, give me 99 bananas. That's not what you want. And so it really, over time, we're starting to see that top tier shelf space increase as consumers develop a palate. But it's not immediate. And so I think one of the mistakes I've seen a lot of brands do over the years is quickly say, hey, we're not moving enough product, quickly drop our prices because they want higher volume. Well, you really destroy some of your brand value there, because now you're moving yourself to a price category where it's ditchweed. And I hate to call it that, but it literally, we've had vendors send us flour in garbage bags with stickers on it, and we're like, what is this that you're trying to send us? So, things in state compliant, but I laugh because it's the difference between a high quality consumer and a high quality vendor and a low quality vendor. So maintaining your brand value, if you know in your heart that it's a good product, the consumers will slowly build that palate. We've got a number of brands on our shelves that have been able to maintain higher prices because they've stuck with, they set their pricing, they set their MSRP, and it's helped them. So.
Won't mean nothing any longer when it comes to cannabis. It's got to be good, it's got to be excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely moving that way. There is still a ton of I guess economy or price-based shopping though, and we see that in our market, and just based on the pricing alone, like there are a ton of educated consumers, but at the end of the day, when you look at average household income, most people are gonna, when they're reaching for something on the shelf, they're gonna buy that $60 or $80 ounce versus the $200 ounce, and it's sometimes they'll come in of a special occasion, but ultimately like you sell 9 to 1. You sell 9 of these $60 ounces to 1 of the 200. So just recognizing that from like a retail standpoint and a brand standpoint is like, where do you want to align yourself? What kind of brand do you want to have? If you're a grower, do you want to be that $60 option and have to move a ton of volume, and so you have to reach scale to be able to make a profit there, or do you want to be a smaller boutique to where you can continue to maintain that high price, and then that way you understand that you're not going to move as much volume, but you still deliver one of the best products in the state.
Yeah, and we've seen a lot of growers set up different tiers of their branding, right? And so they'll go pheno hunting, and they'll find some of the rarest strains in the world and be like, okay, well, this is our top tier, and they'll brand it as such. They'll make a separate name for it. And then they still have, 50, 100,000 square feet of canopy space where they're just run-of-the-mill, whatever strains that they're getting at the time. It's good. It's not amazing, but it's awesome, and then they run that at a lower price point. Yeah.
Brand diversification. Yeah. No problem. Happy to help. Any other questions? Yes.
Oh, got one more question. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Ben. Yeah, he brought up a really good point. I mean, that I guess kind of cluing everybody in on our conversation last night. Michigan started medically, right? And so we had our medical license first. The products that we had available were excellent. You know, it was true medicine. You could get 1,200 milligram THC tincture. You could get, I mean, extremely high gummies, you know, as much milligrams as you needed. And what happened is once Michigan transitioned to recreational edibles were capped at 100 milligrams. So immediately manufacturers didn't have the option to roll over edibles that were over 100 milligrams. So it really leveled the playing field. And so what we started to see is that a lot of those medical products, they're still medical, but they were built the same way as our rec products. They were not high potency. They weren't any different other than the fact that you didn't have to pay the excise tax on them. And so it really kind of squashed the medical market and depleted some of the variety. And so when we talk about product differentiation, I think that's a huge opportunity for tribes, especially if they're not going to compact and buy products that are available. You're really going to create value for someone that is struggling with cancer that goes, hey, I need to come in and I need 1,200 milligrams, or I even need 5,000 a day because I'm in pain. You don't want to come to a recreational store and buy it 100 milligrams at a time. It's inefficient, it's expensive. And so I think touching on your point, I'm hoping I'm answering your question there, Ben, but I think it's a huge opportunity to differentiate. We've kept one of our medical licenses in Negaunee Township, Michigan. It's right near our hometown. We've held on to it, but it just doesn't make sense. You know, in our area, we went from 300 caregivers down to 45 in our county. And so nobody's renewing now that it's recreational. And kind of the sad part is there's not as much supply on the medical side. So even though you don't have to pay the excise tax, we're paying more for it than we are the rec product. So it's still cheaper for them to purchase the recreational product.
Yeah, to add to that, I mean, we see a 14-to-1 medical to recreational sales. So these brands, suppliers, growers, processors, whatever you want to call them, they see this, and then the demand for their product is for so much recreational product. And I mean, ultimately they're businesses, and they look at the supply and the demand. And so what they do is they just create a one-size-fits-all, and they take the medical product and they fit it so they only produce 100 milligrams, even though it is medical product. It could go rec or med, so then that way they only have to produce one product instead of having two different SKUs, they just produce one, and then that way they have the flexibility to sell it as recreation or medical. So it definitely depletes the medical market. And like in our area, I think at one point there was over 10 medical licenses in the Upper Peninsula, and I believe we're the only one left with a medical license at this point because of what the recreational market has done. And part of that is attributed to the tax schema. Michigan's law was passed as a ballot initiative, and so we have some of the lowest cannabis tax in the nation at 10% excise tax, where a lot of other states, I know I've heard of Illinois and Chicago, as high as 42% on their cannabis. In states like that, medical products being able to bypass those taxes at the register for the consumer, there's going to be a higher demand. But with only a 10% excise tax, when customers are buying a $10 pack of gummies versus an $11 pack of gummies, they're not going to go to the doctor. They're not going to get their renewal. They're just going to go, and generally it's the path of least resistance for the medical patient still to just come in and buy the recreational product, because it's the same thing and just pay the 10% excise tax.
Rick Simpson oil too. I don't know if anybody here is familiar with RSO, but it's traditionally alcohol based, and that's not something we're allowed to do in the Michigan market. It's just not allowed. We sell RSO, but it's not the RSO that a lot of people have come to love or that they've sought out in other places that they can only find with caregivers. So that's something else to think about, is if you aren't going to sign a compact and you're going to operate on your own, well, take a look and monitor everything that's going on with state licensed products and say, how can we provide more value? Because ultimately, that's really the beauty of the sovereignty, is that you don't need, okay, well, we're going to offer marijuana, but we're going to do it differently, and we're going to have product differentiation. There's a lot of products that you could create by not following that same or the same protocol that Michigan did. Hopefully Wisconsin will be different and take it into consideration. But yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much. Another question? All right. Well, you got to make your way up here anyway, Colin.
Yeah. So again, our experience is limited to Michigan, and so Michigan does have a designated consumption license, and so there are opportunities for operators or corporations or groups to be able to create these designated consumption lounges where people can come in and ingest or smoke and use cannabis. But unfortunately, the state does not allow these facilities to have like food kitchens, or they can't sell beverages, they can't sell food. So it's been really difficult for that to happen in the state of Michigan. And then on top of that, the consumption lounges are not allowed to retail cannabis because it's not a retail license. The retailers have that. So these consumption lounges are very few and far in between because there's no way to monetize it. How do you charge someone $5 at the door to get in, and then they had to buy their cannabis somewhere else? So it's really an ancillary business to a retail. So the ones that we are seeing are buildings that are attached to retailers where they can come in and they can sell you the cannabis here, and then you can go next door and use it there. But I haven't seen any models where somebody's actually like selling you a cup of coffee where you can put your own distillate in it, or where you can buy a sandwich and there's anything that's done on site. So.
And when you think about consumer experience, and we've kind of thought about this as like, okay, if we did have consumption at, let's say a casino or anywhere on tribal land, what would it look like? Well, with the state licensing schema, you can't mix alcohol and you can't mix cigarettes, and so it becomes a weird thing where you're isolating the cannabis user, and it's not really what they not that cannabis users want to be with people that are smoking, but ultimately you have to think about like, yeah, is the person going to pay $20 to go into a room just to smoke? No, it's like you have to have live entertainment. So one of the things that we personally did is we had what was called Camp Cannabis. So we rented a 40-acre campground, and we had Sublime, Afro Man, artists from around the nation come up and play. We had open cannabis consumption. We were actually the first group in the state of Michigan to have open consumption outside. So we basically licensed the entire campground, and then we had designated areas where you weren't allowed to smoke weed versus the inverse where there's designated areas to smoke weed. And then we were luckily able we were down to the wire. It was a very trying process to also get a liquor license at that event. But also ultimately we ended up partnering with another group. We rented a separate space, and we were able to integrate that as well. So having an outdoor music festival that included alcohol, open use of cannabis, and live music was, it was a phenomenal step in the right direction.
Cool. Thanks, Logan. I just wanted to say we do have some handouts of the slideshow and more of an in-depth analysis. If anybody wants a copy, we'd be happy to hand those out. But I just want to say thank you guys so much for your time, and thanks for having us. This has been great.
Yes.
Yeah,
A round of applause for our sponsors. So our sponsors really, all of them helped make many great things happen, the summit, as well as for us to be able to bring in a few scholarship recipients, students learning, any barrier, obstacle to our young people being able to seek that knowledge. We want to eliminate that. So if I know that a couple of our scholarship recipients had to leave due to the weather to get back home. But if I could just have our scholarship recipients stand up and be recognized. They do amazing work, and I just appreciate them. Thank you so much. Let's get a drum roll going for Colin to come up here and take the stage. The notorious IBG, co-founder of the Indigenous Business Group. Colin's just going to kind of just give some parting words of wisdom. He's like, wait, what? Parting words of wisdom, just kind of like a summary recap, some of the high notes that he captured that he wants us all to walk away with. And just thank you all again for convening, for sharing your time and your knowledge, the sacrifice of the time away from your family. So thank you to your families for allowing you to be able to lead and do this work. And I'm going to turn it over to Colin.
All right. Well, thank you, Mary Jane, for this opportunity to kind of close out the past few days. My takeaway, which I hope I share some of those same thoughts with you, is that there are people here that are willing to help. This is a new industry, especially when it comes to Wisconsin. We have tribal leaders representing most, if not all, of the tribes this week, which is very nice to see. And with that, I think it's important for us to continue to have these conversations. I know we'll be around this afternoon, chopping it up, talking. So feel free to interact with the sponsors, with the panelists, and everybody that was part of this. But I really want to continue the momentum. We've seen a lot of positive feedback with ICIA, and we're looking to build on that. Some of the early challenges that we've identified, we keep hearing that are our opposition to this. And I kind of push back on that because I think that the perceived opposition is actually our potential partnerships. Whether that's big industry, including the Tavern League, road builders. This is an economy, this is an entire industry that a lot of people can be involved in. Not everybody has to grow the plant or sell it. And so I think that's something to keep in mind is the ancillary businesses that are here and that are real opportunities for individuals and our tribes. And with that, also encourage, I'm a huge proponent of entrepreneurship, of thinking outside of the box, taking those leaps, those risks. I know some people aren't built that way, but there's a lot of us that are. And I just want to encourage you to lean into those. I mentioned the experiential aspect of this industry. I have a tourism background, and I think that's something that is lacking in my visits to operators is, you know, you kind of get that experience of a retail, but there's not anything that's really pushing and leaning into something new. And that's where I think Wisconsin can really differentiate ourselves by offering and incorporating that language that would allow for us to do the things that aren't currently being done in other states. So I think it's wide open. I look forward to the creativity, the relationships that were built here. I encourage everyone to follow up, do some networking, and just continue to lean into the industry and push back against the status quo in terms of this is how it has to be. It doesn't have to be that way. We can take away some of the good things, learn from the challenges that other people have had, and use that to our advantage. So with that, I just want to say thank you for the last few days, dedicating the time, the resources to get here. Hopefully, you're able to get out for those that are flying. This is Wisconsin. This is what happens. So we're used to it, and we can adapt. But thank you so much for being here. And with that, Rob, if you want to close it out, or if this is it. Here you go.
Yo, thanks, Colin. There's not a lot of people left. We get it. People had to hit the road, but this was super fun for me. One of the things we were talking about last night with tourism, and I know everyone had conversations, and sorry if we were not all able to spend good quality time with each other, but this is just a stepping stone towards bigger relationships and conversations, was fun and tourism and golf. And Sweetgrass is the course where the dispensary is basically sitting on the course. And that course is now cannabis friendly. So the idea of, hey, well, how can we get together and talk more business? Well, let's have a ICIA fundraiser at Sweetgrass that's cannabis friendly. We all love golf. We all love cannabis, you know, so let's make it happen. So these things are happening. Like action is happening, connections are being made, follow-ups are happening, and plans are in action. So I'm so excited for the connections here. I appreciate everyone here today coming to talk about cannabis. I get up for this kind of stuff. I hope you guys do too. I hope there's good knowledge shared. Again, what you do with this is up to you. So if you go back and you just kind of rest on this, I always like have anxiety after these because I want to follow up and I want to make sure that I'm remembering all these conversations so that I can do something with it. The execution of plans is really where, you know, that makes me feel good. It makes me feel like I'm purposeful and that I'm doing my job. So I hope you all feel the same way. Again, thank you all for the time. MJ, thank you to all of our team here that has helped Brent, Amanda, the whole video team as well. Again, we appreciate you. Join ICIA. I would be remiss if I didn't plug that. Sign up for us. You know, we're still in development. If you want to help us, we've talked to people about developing and stepping up to represent our state chapters and regional chapters as well. So those are plans that are in progress. But we need that help. Sign up for us. Come work with us. We want to see you at our next event. Thank you again.